Hello, candle lovers. Thanks for tuning in to me today. My name is Greg, and this is all about candles. And I have a review for you today from Goose Creek, and this one is Lost in Nature. From what Goose Creek is calling their luxuries collection. I thought that the presentation and the packaging on these candles were okay. This sort of like sheeny colored finish is actually on the glass. It's not a wraparound label. And one very like nitpicky thing that I did notice about these candles is that when they were burning, there was sort of an uneven opaqueness to the glass, which looked a little bit odd when they were burning. It sort of made the glass look a little bit sort of cloudy and honestly like not a very like luxurious look, to be honest with you. I've burned through quite a few of these candles now, and while I do think they did a decent job of the packaging and a great job like curating the fragrances for this collection, there's really nothing about any of these candles that have given me any reason to believe that they're any sort of step up in terms of like quality or like burn cleanliness or anything like that when it comes to like these versus like regular Goose Creek candles. I'm really not noticing any difference, and I've kind of called out Goose Creek for that before in terms of the way that they market some of their collections. Like they have candles in the aromatherapy line and in the odor eliminating line that, from what I can tell, are exactly the same. You know what I mean? Like I burned the lavender vanilla in both the aromatherapy line and the odor eliminating line, and there was like no difference at all. So then what makes the aromatherapy candle an aromatherapy candle? And what makes the odor eliminating candle an odor eliminating candle? And what makes these candles more luxurious than the usual offerings that they give, other than the chic contemporary packaging and a nicely curated collection of fragrances? I really don't think that there's much difference. And to be honest, I didn't love the way that these candles looked when they were burning. Like I said, some might consider it very nitpicky, but there was sort of a strange unevenness to the opaqueness of these glass jars that I wasn't a huge fan of, but whatever, who cares? Let's move on to talking about Lost in Nature, because I did really like this fragrance and it was a pretty good performing candle. The scent notes on it are forest cedar, raw suede, creamy fig, and coconut. And it's actually news to me that coconut was listed in these scent notes, because I wasn't really picking up on the coconut at all. There is a little bit of like a sweetness to it, like sort of a dark sort of like a deep, almost cologne-y sweetness that I think could be that fig note. Primarily, though, this is a very, very foresty and cedar forward candle. Raw suede, yeah, sure, maybe a little bit. And I actually think that there's a little bit of moss in here. This candle really does smell like a real like forest full of cedar trees. It actually smells so sort of outdoorsy and foresty that to me, this doesn't really come across as a fragrance that would actually lend itself that well to like a cologne. It really kind of smells quite literally like you are in a forest. Do you know what I mean? It's got a really sort of interesting freshness and darkness to it that I quite like. The most prominent scent note in here is definitely that cedar note, and it's a really nice, like sharp, like direct sort of cedar note. And like I said, I feel like there's something a little bit mossy and a little bit damp in here as well. And then that fig note isn't like a super sweet, like bright fig note. It's more of like a dark, sort of thick, sort of resinous, like sweetness, sort of lingering in like the base note of the fragrance. I'd say that the top note is actually like that really, really like bright and sharp cedar note. And then there's sort of like a more sort of generic woodsiness and a bit of like pungent, funky mossiness hanging out in like the middle of the fragrance. Yeah, and then something a little bit sweet and dark on the bottom. It's really actually quite nice. I enjoyed this candle quite a bit. I liked the fragrance. I liked that it was a really sort of foresty, masculine, like realistic scent without leaning into sort of a super like cologne type of vibe. Like this definitely isn't a fragrance that I would want to wear because it's just a little bit too like realistic wood for me in a way, if that makes any sense. Really, really nice. And it performed quite well too. No big complaints about the performance. I do sound like a bit of a broken record when I'm reviewing Goose Creek candles because they do usually tend to end up like this right at the very end. What I have started doing with my Goose Creek candles is blowing them out when I've got probably about an inch of them left. I'm just calling it a day when I've got an inch left because they do tend to start getting quite dirty and murky. And so I've just started putting the last 20% of my Goose Creek candles under a heat lamp or in a candle crock. You know what I mean? That's kind of just what I've started doing in general with all of the Goose Creek candles that I burn. Unless it's the Goose Creek candle, the rare Goose Creek candle, that's just an incredibly clean burn from top to bottom and shows no signs of like sooting or discoloration, then I'll obviously let it finish. But now on, I'm just kind of calling it a day when I've got an inch left because no matter how much you trim the wicks or limit the burn times, you do tend to get wax that starts to look like this once you're down to about 20 to 30% of the candle left. However, the majority of this candle did burn really quite nicely and cleanly. I'd say that the strength and throw on this was a pretty solid 7, probably like a 6.5-ish in my more open area. Definitely a 7 once it got into more of a medium-sized space like my bedroom. So no qualms about the strength and throw. It definitely had a presence to it. Could it have been a little bit stronger? Sure, I would have actually liked for this candle to have hit an 8 and really like knocked it out of the park, or like knocked it out of the forest, I should say. But I would almost always like for my candles to be like 1 point higher than they actually are. So, you know, that's a little bit of a nitpick. These days, with the way that candles are, I feel like a pretty solid 7.5 is a good rating for strength and throw. And yeah, this is a really nice fragrance and I enjoy burning it quite a bit. Like I said, you know, I think that you just kind of have to come to terms with the fact that if you love Goose Creek candles and you buy a lot of them, you're gonna end up with some dirtiness at the end. I have quit trying to burn all of my Goose Creek candles right down to the very end. From now on, I'm just calling it a day at this point, and I actually think I'm gonna put the rest of this like under a candle lamp or in my candle crock tonight and finish it off. Yeah, Lost in Nature by Goose Creek. I really enjoyed this one. Would I repurchase it? I don't think so. I don't think it's a repurchase for me. As much as I enjoyed it, this feels like one of those candles that I was happy to experience once, but I didn't really love it enough to want to repurchase it. Spoiler alert, so far the only candle from this like luxury collection that I've wanted to repurchase is That's So Vanilla. Anyways, that's all I've got for you folks today. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. You can follow me on Instagram at allaboutcandles and email your burning questions to allaboutcandles@gmail.com. If you could hit me up with a like, a comment, subscribe to my channel, that would really mean the world to me. I love you for watching. Until next time, my dear gorgeous and beautiful candle-loving friends, let's burn some candles and bitch about it. Thanks, you guys. Bye for now.